All right. Again, good evening, all, and welcome to the November 2025 meeting of ANC3C's Planning, Housing, Zoning, Planning, Zoning, Housing, and Economic Development Committee meeting. We have one main item here on the agenda for this evening, which is our continued discussion of the Woodley Park and Cleveland Park zoning changes. We will be discussing the results of the feedback form that we put out for the past month or so into the community, and what those look like and what our response to put into the official zoning commission record for this will be, and start formulating that thoughts for that draft so that we can circulate that when we notice our November public meeting next week, and include a draft with that so we can get comments throughout the week from folks before the meeting on November 17th, prior to the zoning commission hearing, which is December 1st. And folks are free to submit into the record and sign up to testify for that as well. All right. So I shared the results with the committee members, scrubbed of identifying information other than where the comments were located in folks' SMDs, but not including their addresses. In summary, as of 3:30 to 4 o'clock today, the responses that we got, we had 6 respondents say that they support some of the changes and not others, and they specify below, and I'll briefly go over what some of those comments were. We had a total of 25 people oppose the proposed changes, and 101 people support the proposed changes. Those numbers include the folks who showed up and filled out the form at the library and left it with us. I typed those in and included those. We had a pretty decent turnout on Saturday. I would say there were probably about 45, 50 people that came through in the course of the 3 hours that we were there. Lots of engaging conversations. We had a number of the commissioners, I believe 5 of us were there for certain periods of time or the entire time. So that was great to have that level of participation, both from the community and from the commissioners and committee members, because Bob was there the whole time and brought candy. Extra credit for the candy, Bob. So I think that I'll start off with, do any commissioners or committee members have any additional like opening comments they want to give before we dive into what came through from the feedback?
Well, I will just second that the participation at the library the other day was really just great to see. Really just heard a lot of thoughtful comments from people from around the neighborhood, a few people who weren't really in support of the changes, but then a whole lot of really positive comments towards them as well. So I thought it was a really helpful conversation.
Anyone else? I guess there are a few points I want to kind of clarify that came up that were consistent in both the conversations that we were having at the library, as well as in some of the comments that we received from the feedback form. The first being that none of this negates the Historic Preservation Review Board and the Historic Preservation's office review of any projects that would be proposed under any new zoning regulations. So that is not going away. Anything and everything, once the project is moving along, will go through the same review process projects always have in the historic districts of both Woodley Park and Cleveland Park. So hopefully that alleviates the concerns on that end. There's also comments about providing setbacks and step backs with these proposed zoning changes. And one was from the Cleveland Park Historical Society, and the ask was to urge the ANC to ask the zoning commission to provide setbacks and step downs to allow the historic buildings to better accommodate new buildings. The setbacks and step downs are actually part of the Connecticut Avenue design guidelines, which were already approved by HPRB a while ago. So those would be handled by HPRB in the design reviews. So those are defined, and we have links to those guidelines. I can provide it here too, in this chat. One sec. Okay. And to further on that point, the Office of Planning did include these rear yard requirements into the zoning text amendments in the set down report for both Cleveland Park and Woodley Park. And those read as follow. For Cleveland Park, it's under section 507 rear yard, 507.1 in the NMU-8A/CP zone, a minimum rear yard of 12 feet above 20 feet shall be provided. And 507.2, no part of the building, including the penthouse or rooftop structure, shall project above a plane drawn at 45-degree angle from the line located 40 feet directly above the rear property. By the way, there are diagrams of these things if you're not mentally able to follow along with these numbers. Within the development guidelines, I just linked there. There are some blocking diagrams that depict this. And then for Woodley Park, it's 607 rear yard, 607.1 in the NMU-98/WP zone, a minimum rear yard of 12 feet above 20 feet shall be provided except on square 2203 where rear yard shall not be required. 607.2, no part of the building, including the penthouse or rooftop structure, shall project above a plane drawn at a 45-degree angle from the line located 40 feet directly above the rear property, except on square 2203, where this provision shall not be required. That particular square is the triangular McDonald's Metro Chipotle block. And another request was about affordable housing, where Cleveland Park Historical Society encouraged the ANC to advocate for the creation of as much affordable housing as possible. The new zoning would be mapped to IZ Plus, which would require a developer to permanently set aside and subsidize up to 20% of the gross floor area of the residential building for those making 60% of the median family income for the area for rental units and 80% MFI for condos. These income levels would be considered workforce housing. So just wanted, that was a common concern that was coming up on a number of the feedback that we received, including the Historical Society. So we just kind of wanted to address that up front. So hopefully that clears up that that kind of confusion or concern. Another thing to note is that there are folks that were concerned with infrastructure and traffic changes. Again, each project would be continue to go through the HPRB process as well as the permitting process. And within the permitting process, so the redevelopment of commercial properties, and I'm reading directly from page 11 of the development guidelines. Redevelopment of commercial properties within this area is expected to occur incrementally over a 5 to 15-year period. Development and growth forecasts developed by the Office of Planning inform district agencies' capital and operational plans to ensure public facilities and services are in line with anticipated demographic changes. Finally, development coordination and site-specific interagency review processes for physical infrastructure improvement and transportation demand management are conducted in the advance of permitting based on the size of development, types of land uses, and number of new person trips generated by the project. So that's why you're not seeing like detailed infrastructure or traffic planning studies within this process of this is changing zoning to match what's already been approved in the comprehensive plan amendments, as well as the future land use plan changes. So any property owner at this point in time could ask for these zoning changes on their own. This is just the Office of Planning doing it in an area in one process rather than piecemeal. So that is what I just wanted to put out there. Having seen some consistencies and could that are clarified by what's in a large amount of documentation. So I'm gonna be quiet for a little bit if anybody else wants to comment. Rick, I saw your hand came up for a second.
Yeah, I did. I just had more of a question on, how we're going to address this tonight. But since you spoke about a couple of comments, actually, and I appreciate that, but it's not quite as clear. I did see the email come around, I think from Bob, on comments from Ms. Podolsky. And I went back and looked at hers. I mean, she's talking primarily about front setbacks. And there are no front setbacks specified in the proposed zone. What she seems to be concerned about is that in the front there could be 80-foot vertical additions going up above a one-story facade with no setback. And then in the rear, in fact, the zone contemplates 100% lot occupancy in the ground floor, and the rear setbacks don't start to kick in 30 or 40 feet above on the rear side. My concern with, and I appreciate the work that OP has put into these, but I have a couple of concerns. One, I've asked OP several times why they're not more prescriptive in the zone about front setbacks rather than relying on the planning guidelines. In the Chevy Chase zone, they've put setbacks in. And remember, those are guidelines. And in fact, the Connecticut Avenue guidelines directly conflict with some other guidelines that OP has issued or that HPO has issued on additions to contributing structures. So, ultimately their guidelines, setbacks should be in the zoning reg. The other question that I have about these is, as we know, the proposed zone is supposed to be not incompatible with the comprehensive plan. And, that is a fairly elastic standard. It doesn't say it has to be consistent. It's to be not inconsistent with the comprehensive plan, but it means that it has to be not inconsistent with all the elements that are applicable. And, just in looking at the historic preservation citywide element, there are a number of ones that it's arguably not, such as HP 246. The zoning for each historic district shall be consistent with the predominant height and density of contributing buildings in the district. And there are numerous others. So I think OP is going to have a bit of difficulty showing that it's not inconsistent with the historic preservation element. And I've asked them about this, and maybe they'll be putting in another submission that will explain why it is not inconsistent in their view.
Okay. Bob?
Yeah, I was just to the front setback issue that Rick raised. I mean, there's actually quite a bit of coverage of that in the design guidelines, and while they are guidelines, It is, I think, I was actually surprised that the Office of Planning put in specific rear yard requirements that are more of a form-based code than anything. Given that the HPRB typically, has opinions on those things, and it implements them in their design review. But they are there on the rear yard, and they're don't start at 30 or 40 feet. They start at 20 feet. So pretty low down. Certainly below the height of at least in Cleveland Park and the buildings behind it. And then they pretty aggressively start at 40 feet at a 45-degree angle, which is a pretty serious set down. So I guess if you were to advise the zoning commission what the front setback should be, what should it be?
I would say at least 15 to 20 feet from the front of the contributing structure with an additional setbacks, at stories 5 and higher. That would be consistent with what's in the design guidelines. And would also be consistent with historic preservation principles, actually more liberal than historic preservation principles, which normally provide for a setback of 10 feet for every additional story of height. So. Thank you.
Other comments from committee or commission members before we open it up to the public? I will also just mention that a few people in the feedback in support of this actually oppose setting back anything because of the fear that nothing would get built at all. So I think you have arguments on both sides of that potentially. So I just want to make sure that those folks commenting on that end are acknowledged and heard too. All right. Commissioners, committee members, then we'll move to community comments and discussion. Okay, anyone in the community wish to make a comment or ask questions on this? Raise your virtual hand, come on screen. Andrea? Oh, can you unmute yourself or do I need to give you permission?
Sorry, I'm trying to get my video going. There I am. Hi.
Hi.
Good to see everyone. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that it seemed there's a lot of jargon being thrown around that doesn't help civilians like me understand some of what's happening. But one, I'm hoping that we can all hear what people have said. I don't know that people understand what is a setback, and to understand that without them, there's just a sheer flat surface going from the sidewalk all the way up. And our concern was the front, not the rear. And that's just part of good design and would make whatever's being built nicer looking. It's an architectural aspect as well as just something that makes sense. So we're less concerned about the rear, and there are guidelines for contributing structures for what can happen behind. But we have always been concerned about what's in front. I'd also like to remind everyone that the Cleveland Park Historical Society created a very succinct and easy to understand set of guidelines for the commercial district, which HPRB reviewed, and you can find them on the Office of Planning site. And I think it would be interesting for the public as well as ANC3C to read them and see how reasonable they are. We're not against the development. but we feel that development can happen with greater sensitivity to the surrounding area. And yeah, that's about it. We'll continue. What I wasn't clear, what Janelle, what you said before about there's going to be another opportunity. Your committee is going to be submitting something which the public will once again be responding to. Is that what you said in your beginning comments, that there's going to be another step between now and December 1st?
So this is the main opportunity for the engagement on what we're going to put in a draft that the ANC will then vote on at our committee meeting. So we're
Okay.
going to, once we draft this is to inform that draft.
Right.
We will then issue the notice for our regular public meeting, where we will have what we're proposing that we're going to vote on. And people can comment on that, specifics on that, not broadly. I mean, they can, but it's going to be challenging to. That's why we were giving enough runway to collect enough comment to then have this informed conversation at this meeting to then inform the next step in this process.
I've heard from a number of people that they couldn't get in because they needed to sign into Google Docs in order to do that. And that is this closed now for people to send in comments, or can people still send in comments?
There is also instructions to the email address that would have went to all the commissioners within that form. And it was only a 1-question form. So
no, I know, but not to the commissioners. I'm talking to the public who wanted to answer the yes, the oppose or support.
That was the instruction, was to email the commissioners if you couldn't sign into the form, because you didn't you could
Okay.
send an email.
Okay, I don't know that everyone noticed that.
We're not an administrative agency. We don't have a hard and fast deadline for comments. I mean,
But we do have
but the public can comment up until the ANC takes action, you know, and commissioners can consider those or
yeah,
or
you
not.
know, I can observe that I hate to consider this as opposition and support, because I hope that people who live in Cleveland Park can come to some, middle ground agreement so that we don't reflect general politics here. But, there's much more organized support than opposition. And so I would agree with Rick that we should be able to, let people know and remind them how easy it is to send. Not everyone's even knows who their commissioners are. We didn't even know there was a missing commissioner from ANC3C. So, but anyway, I just wanted to know that if we encourage people to send comments still to their SMD commissioner, that it will be acknowledged and added to your count.
There is one email address that actually goes to all of the commissioners' email addresses that people just need to email that one address so that every commissioner is able to see all of the comments that we're getting. And that's the most helpful way, rather than going to a single
Sure.
member.
That sounds great.
So we're all seeing each other and we're not having to forward
Yeah.
and remember who we're forwarding to.
That makes sense. Yeah.
The other thing to note, because I feel like you're throwing a little bit of shade at us for not announcing that there was a vacancy that wasn't posted in the DC Register, and we weren't informed of it until like right before then. It was posted this past Friday on the 31st.
Yeah, well, it's terrible that none of you knew.
And I had a question for you about the design guidelines that your organization has posted. How much community engagement was involved in that process of developing those guidelines?
There was not. We developed them as a suggestion. We sent them to HPRB for their feedback and thoughts about it, and they liked them, and so posted them. We're not a public organization. It was a contribution to the conversation.
Okay. And they did not vote to adapt or approve those?
They posted them on their website. We didn't ask them for that, and we sent them to share, and they as I said, read them and posted them. And you can find them on the OP site.
Okay, thank you. Peter.
Hi, nice to meet you. I actually, speaking of the vacancy, I went down today and filed to run. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
We
Got
elect
it.
Mary to
So
that.
comment on, I think in general, I support this. I think my comment on the setback, just from like a layperson's, to keep it simple, is if you go up and down the avenue, it's a very wide avenue, and often setbacks on avenues are based on the total height that you have and the width. So it's a ratio of the width of the avenue to the height. So I think as it's in the current proposal, seems very appropriate for Connecticut Avenue. If you go up and down Connecticut Avenue, there's quite a few tall buildings that come up to the street frontage. In Cleveland Park in particular, many of the oldest buildings in the neighborhood actually are quite tall and come right up to the street frontage. So I don't see how this is really in conflict with historic preservation or good guidelines. And I also don't see how kind of an extra layer when this still keeps HPRB review, things like that in place. You know, it gets confusing from a professional perspective when you sort of have different parts of the code trying to address the same thing. So, you know, I think I support historic preservation, and it's much easier to get good results if there's kind of one agency responsible for reviewing historic preservation. Once you start to try to drag that into parts of the zoning code, I think it can get very complicated and you end up with worse results for everyone.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I think that the measurement of building heights and its origin of coming from the street or the avenue and the frontage of the property, and that's from the early 1900s. And that's like what the Height Act is based off of, which is why you see what you see, you know, with the older and taller residential buildings here and what happens downtown. If that's
Exactly.
lay people to understand, it's like that's what you're looking at, and it matches that proportions and dimensions. Bob.
Yeah, thanks. I was just going through the Connecticut Avenue development guidelines again, and there's actually quite a bit of guidance on the front setbacks. That there are distinguishing setbacks required throughout, deeper setbacks for contributing buildings. They give a lot of examples. This was a conversation during HPRB's review of those development guidelines and ultimately voted to approve them as the guidelines that they will at least start with when they consider any project here. But I guess to, who was it? Oh, he's not on. Was it the person who just spoke, Peter? I kind of agree. This is why my comment was I was surprised that the rear yards were included in the actual zoning text amendment, because everything that we had heard up to this point from the Office of Planning is that HPRB will review every project, and then will apply their thinking to what the, you know, setbacks and compatibility considerations would be. Why put it in the zoning code? So, I mean, I guess what I'm hearing is that the Clean Park Historical Society would prefer to have it codified in the zoning code, which would, I guess, would be how would you consider that? A floor or a minimum of what could be done, and HPRB could do something different, but I don't know. I mean, there's lots of things that the HPRB does that zoning allows, but then HPRB doesn't allow. This would be one of those areas where I wouldn't know what the correct answer would be like. So anyhow, I guess I'm just trying to get a clarity that you'd prefer this to be in the zoning code rather than in the hands of the Historic Preservation Review Board. That was a question for Andrea.
We just are looking for clarity. I'm not enough of an expert in terms of how the city works to say whether it should be in zoning. As a civilian, I would say, why not? I don't even understand why infrastructure, it's a tight little commercial strip. Why infrastructure for sewage and electricity isn't part of what needs to be understood, because the buildings are so close together. And my understanding is, as people bundle in order to build up, they're going to need to deal with all that stuff, and why there wouldn't be, from my perspective, I'd want to know that Cleveland Park's infrastructure can support building up on that, I mean, it's rickety looking. You look at some of those buildings and you wonder how they're standing without anything on top of them. So yeah, I mean, why not have, everything can be challenged in this city anyway. So why not set some standards that people understand that have to do with infrastructure and setbacks?
Thanks.
I mean, a bit of this process is chicken and egg. Like, so the owners of the buildings aren't going to invest in any of the studies, the feasibility studies, anything that would be needed to build anything on top, if they have no potential to be allowed to do that without taking on any additional risk of going through this process on their own. So this may or may not ever come to fruition, but those studies would be done. It's just, it's a process of like, if you're not allowed to do something, why would you sink the money into studying whether or not it can be done or not? And then that's where the investigations, the feasibility study, then in turn comes to figure out what you're talking about, Andrea, with like, can the sewer system, the structures handle the thing? But you're not, again, like, there's levels of risk at every one of these steps that cost a pretty exorbitant amount of money. Rick.
Yeah, thanks, Janelle. I want to pick up on something I think it was Ms. Podolsky said on clarity. We live in an economy that is regulated depending on the sector to a greater or lesser extent. And the thing that economic actors want most of all, and I would think developers included, is clarity. So putting minimal setbacks in the zoning code not only provides that clarity, but it's what has been done in some other areas, including where bespoke zones have recently been issued. There's another reason too why I think it should be in the zoning code. People may not know, but the last couple legislative years in the council, Council Member Nadeau, who's stepping down, but I think other council members have introduced legislation that would significantly limit the Historic Preservation Review Board's design review over new construction in historic districts, and specifically would preclude HPRB determining that an application is incompatible with the preservation law if such a finding would necessitate a reduction in residential building density below what otherwise would be permitted. And so, that's an additional reason why, again, for clarity, and I think for some kind of balance, it's important to have it in the zoning rather than relying completely on HPRB, because there is a serious attempt to limit HPRB's authority. Thanks.
All right. Any other community members? Committee members, community members, anyone? Swale.
Hi, thanks for having this meeting and all the outreach you all have done and everyone else has done regarding this topic. I mean, I guess I just want to quickly comment. There was a comment made that there's two sides, and there's one side that's more organized, one side that's not, and hoping to meet in the middle. I mean, I think the current proposal on the table is the one that was in the middle. I remember this engagement and discussion has been happening for a long time. So we're already in sort of, from at least like, you know, my view of like engaging with this for 4+ years, probably. We're somewhere in the middle of where I think different opinions in the community came up. So I think that's probably one of the reasons I don't think anyone that's for this proposal is not meant to be extreme on one side or the other. It's more just being okay with the moderate proposal.
Thank you. All right. Anyone else? All right. So we've done, as Swale said, we've done engagement on this for at least 5 years now. Throughout this process, whether it be the comp plan, going through the Cleveland Park and Woodley Park life, what was it called? Public life study, the development guidelines, community engagement, and that all of the community engagement within the ANC3C over the years, passing resolutions supporting the changes that were made to the comp plan that led to the design development guidelines. I will take charge on getting all of that information together to inform the zoning commission of the robust, deep amount of background that has gone into getting to where this proposal is in front of the zoning commission. I would ask, hopefully, my colleagues on the commission that are my co-chairs, respectively, in Woodley Park and Cleveland Park, to have a look at the survey results, which are coded by the SMDs, so you can tell which SMDs are in Cleveland Park and which are in Woodley Park, and formulate like what was put in that, and using your other knowledge of the conversations that have gone in the past and all of the other data points and what we've heard from residents of both these areas, and have some specifics to each of those zones, since they are proposed under different title lines. Is that, can I get words from you guys here in commitment?
Happy to help out, Janelle.
Okay, so that we can get that put together. I'd like to bounce it around to the rest of the commissioners and committee members by the end of this week, if possible. And then be able to put that with the notice that goes out on Monday evening for the following week's meeting, and then solicit those comments to the full ANC email address. As we do every meeting, and that email address we changed like 2 years ago now, so. Okay. Does anyone have any objections to that plan moving forward? And this doesn't exclude any other commissioners or committee members that live in those areas from contributing.
That's fine. Janelle, I was going to suggest, could you put the all email address in the chat so everyone has it? I tried to do it and I couldn't post it, so it'd just be good if everyone saw it.
Okay, it's in
Thanks.
there. Okay. Anyone have anything else on this topic? Anyone have anything else for the general committee business? All right, I would like to thank everyone for their participation now, past, future, always. So appreciate it. Also, Jersey Mike's is giving away free subs, but it was only till 7 tonight. But this is up till their opening, which is like official, I think tomorrow. Just an FYI. For those of you who stayed that long, gonna give you that little treat. All right, cool.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Have a good evening.
Bye.